I, female 32, have two brothers. We'll call them John, 30, and Frank, 29. John and I were very close growing up. Meanwhile, Frank was a difficult kid. He was angry and aggressive, and despite being the youngest, as he got older, he would pull pranks and even physically hurt us. My parents, 55, tried getting him help as a kid, but nothing worked and he progressively got worse over time. By the time I graduated high school, I accepted a scholarship and moved a few states away. When my brother John graduated, he moved to my town for school, and our parents got us an apartment to share. Frank decided not to go to college and ended up spending a few stints in prison for larceny and assault. He has been living at my parents' house ever since. John later met his wife and moved back to our hometown. I stayed after college and have had a pretty good career. When John moved back, he and Frank reconciled. John encouraged me to try reaching out to Frank because he supposedly changed for the better. I had no interest in this. He made my childhood a living hell. I remember when he locked John and me out of the house after school in the rain and laughed. He used to stab and poke me with pencils and other objects from around the house, leaving bruises. He once flushed my betta fish down the toilet because he was upset that my parents wouldn't buy him one too. Not to mention the time he pushed me off my bike and I almost broke my wrist. Needless to say, I made it clear to John and my parents that I don't want to have a relationship with Frank. For my parents' 30th wedding anniversary, they are planning on taking a family trip to Florida. They have invited me, John, family, wife and 2 kids, and Frank and his girlfriend. I would like to go because I don't get to spend time with him often. Being around Frank isn't something I'm looking forward to, but I can tolerate it to see the rest of them. Mom called me yesterday and asked if I would be willing to help cover Frank and his girlfriend's airfare to get to the beach house because Frank is in between jobs and his girlfriend can't afford a plane ticket. I immediately refused and said I'm not comfortable with that. She said that she and Dad have already put too much money into the trip and was really hoping I'd help them out. I suggested maybe my brother and his girlfriend drive down to Florida instead. Mom left the call upset, and then John texted me today asking to please help. He said he'd contribute if he wasn't already paying for 3 other people. Am I the a-hole if I don't buy their tickets? I really wanted to see my parents and nephews, but now I'm not sure if I can still go if they're pressuring me. Not the a-hole. Enablers doing what they do. Enable. Honestly, if I was in your situation, I would just cancel and say I'm not going because there's already too much drama and the trip hasn't started yet. Me and this guy were together for 3 years. We're 19 now. We never talked about the future until a year in. Before then, I'd try to discuss it and he would change the subject. In short, I wanted kids. He didn't. I wanted to stay in Ireland. He didn't. I wanted to get married. He didn't. When I realized it was a bad match, I broke it off, but he asked to get back together, saying we were too young to worry about the future, and we got back together. This happened a few times over the next 18 months. In this time, we probably spent more time apart than together. We knew early on that we wanted different things, and while marriage and kids are something I would want further down the road, I wasn't concerned about his open dislike of marriage and kids because 19 is too young to get married anyway. If I were dating him 10 or 15 years from now and he didn't want to get married, then I might have an issue. But when I'm barely out of my teens, it's not a huge concern, and just loving him and wanting to be with him is enough. When I went to see him this time, I was again considering breaking up with him. Aside from the long-term issues, he is also inconsiderate and has a mean streak that I really don't like. So when I arrived at his place, mentally debating breaking up with him for good this time, he told me he wanted to take me out to dinner. I assumed he wanted to break up too, publicly so I wouldn't cause a scene. I didn't normally cause a scene, but being in public tends to prevent yelling, and we both yell every time we break up. In the last year, he has asked me 2 things that, looking back, now stand out to me. First, he asked about jewelry, what kind of stuff I liked and what my taste was. I assumed it was because my birthday was coming up and he was getting me a bracelet or something. So I told him simple and delicate, silver or steel rather than gold. If there was a color, then blue. Nothing flashy or expensive, as both my job prefers plain jewelry, and it's just my personal preference. I also said, go cheap. The other thing he asked me was how I felt about public proposals. I told him immediately that I, personally, dislike them, as I felt I wouldn't be able to say no, even if I wanted to. I feel like public proposals are okay when they've been specifically requested and agreed on, but one that's totally out of the blue is not okay at all. I assumed he was asking about this because his friend had just proposed to his girlfriend for several years, publicly, and she'd accepted but admitted to him after that she would have preferred something private. I never thought in a million years that he would propose. So you can imagine my shock when we went to dinner and the first thing he did was propose. The ring was huge, gold, gaudy, red gems around a diamond, and the whole thing was the size and shape of a Super Bowl ring. He got on one knee and held it out to me. We were in the middle of this popular restaurant and the place was packed. Everyone there could see what was going on and wasn't even trying to hide that they were looking at us. I said no. Well, I didn't so much say no. I ran out of the restaurant. He drove me there, so I got a cab back and drove home that night. I realized running out wasn't the best thing to do, but I didn't know what else to do. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, and all I knew was that I didn't want to marry him or accept his proposal. I felt like I couldn't even speak, so I was upset about the whole thing. So I just up and ran. I just want to take the opportunity to say here that I really don't care about the rings. Honestly, when I want to get married, which is absolutely not when I'm 19 years old, the right person could just turn to me and say, "Want to get married?" And I'd say yes. I wouldn't even need a ring. I know I'm focusing on the ring and the public proposal a lot, but that's only because of one, how far away it was from what I'd told him my taste was, and two, what happened next. I didn't hear from him until a few weeks later. He said that he thought a proposal was something I'd want, but he saw now that it wasn't. He said that he was out of pocket for the rings. He'd bought us both the same one and gotten them engraved. He linked me to the jeweler's website, and the ring was up for €1,450, about $1,650 or 1,300 pounds. When I asked why he was telling me this, he said that he'd hoped I would cover the cost of mine. He said that as they'd been engraved, he couldn't get a refund. He'd hoped that I would say yes to the proposal, in which case he wouldn't have asked me to pay. But I said no. He also said I'd embarrassed him by saying no in public, and should have said yes, and then if I was really against it, waited to say no when we were alone. We both live in small towns where gossip spreads at church. Enough people were at the restaurant that night that both of us got asked about it at church on Sunday. He has since messaged me saying he's debating calling in a lawyer to sue me for the cost of my ring, €1,450. And he also says that I have caused him emotional distress by turning him down in public, and have publicly humiliated him for both rejecting his proposal in public and leaving him to deal with church gossip, which I had no part in spreading. He says he can also get some money off of me over those other two things. So €1,450 for what he spent on my ring, and extra money for emotional distress and public humiliation. I think his legal claims are all BS, and he wouldn't have a leg to stand on in a court of law. But I am not a law student or a lawyer. He is studying law currently and has an internship at a legal firm. What do I do about all this? Do I need to prepare myself for a lawsuit, or is it even worth worrying about? Edit. He knew I wanted to get married, but not to him. He not only knew this, but said he had no intention of marrying me either. He openly despised marriage right up until the time he proposed, and he knows that we want different things out of marriage. And I told him that this is why I was breaking up with him the times before this that I have ended the relationship. During the course of our relationship, he's also said stuff like, "We're too young to think about marriage. It's not like we're getting married." And, my favorite, "It's not like I'm gonna propose." That one was last April. Edit 2. His mother has reached out to me apologizing for her son's actions. She has said that nothing will come of this and that she raised an idiot. He's using the fact that he's studying law to intimidate you into paying him. He thinks that you'll believe he has a legitimate claim since he knows the law better than you do. He does not have a legitimate claim. You can't sue someone for the cost of an engagement ring they didn't accept. Had you said yes initially and then privately said no, like he'd suggested, he may have a semblance of a case, but you didn't. You are not on the hook because he can't read a room or understand your perspective on the relationship. Block him, ignore him, and go live your life without him. It sounds like it's much better without him in it. My husband and I, 40 male and 36 female, have 2 children, 7 female and 13 male, and have been married for 14 years. My youngest sister, 25 female, her fiancé, 27 male, and their newborn daughter recently moved into town. However, their new place isn't going to be ready until a week after her fiancé was supposed to start his new job. So my husband and I let them stay with us rather than spend the little money they have on a hotel. My sister also helped look after the kids while my husband and I were at work or out for free, and her fiancé even helped my son fix his computer, which was very kind of both of them. Around the second day that my sister's family was staying with us, I noticed that she would leave the room every time that she had to feed my niece. I told her that it wasn't a problem if she breastfed in common areas of the house, so long as she felt okay. My sister was nervous at first, but as time went on, she got more comfortable around the house. Keep in mind that she was being more modest than I was when I breastfed my children, and she only did it when it was, for example, us and my daughter in the room, or her fiancé and me. But even when my son walked in one time, he didn't notice because she was being so discreet. To be honest, he cares more about getting to hold the baby more than anything my sister does. When my husband came home that day, he saw her breastfeeding the baby and his face turned red, and he looked at me to do something. As soon as she noticed, my sister apologized and left the room. He then asked me to either tell my sister not to breastfeed in the open like she was doing, or ask her to cover it up if she did, because he thought it was inappropriate and creepy to do it in front of our son given his age. I explained the situation and told him that if there were any problems, I would talk to our son. If anything, this is a good opportunity to talk to him about being respectful of women's bodies, something his father was clearly having a hard time doing. He raised his voice and told me that this shouldn't have been a choice that I made on my own, and that my sister and I were both being inconsiderate towards him and my son. He said that while there isn't anything wrong with my sister feeding her daughter, that our teenage son is probably sensitive to pretty girls, like my sister, and that whether we like it or not, our son is going to sexualize her boobs. I called the way he was objectifying my sister disgusting, and that we aren't going to raise our kids that way. He stormed out of the room and until now hasn't said a word about it. However, even after I apologized to my sister about the ordeal, she said that she would rather just stay in the guest room to feed her baby because she doesn't want to step on any toes. I'm incredibly mad about this. While I can appreciate where my husband is coming from with the points he made, I think it's perfectly reasonable to allow a new mom to feed her baby wherever, and he honestly grossed me out with how he talked about my sister. Am I the a-hole? Anyone who refers to an adult woman breastfeeding her baby as a pretty girl immediately becomes the a-hole for objectification. Your husband needs to stop thinking of women as amalgamations of body parts and instead practice seeing them as people. Your son seems more mature than your husband at this point. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole, but your husband's attitude is. If they sexualize her breastfeeding, then that's their problem, not you or your sister's. She's feeding a baby for crying out loud, not trying to seduce the boys in your home. Her being attractive shouldn't matter. It's your home too, and if they're uncomfortable with it, then they should leave the room instead of your sister. Not the a-hole, but you should have talked to your husband about it first, since this involves a parenting decision and you should both be on the same page. He isn't wrong that there is a chance your 13-year-old will sexualize this. We sexualize everything at that age. We can't help it. But as you said, it's an opportunity to learn to respect women's bodies. Plus, breastfeeding should be normalized. My wife and I used to fight a lot because I felt that she was making parenting decisions without consulting me. Most of the time I agreed with her decisions. I just wanted to have a say and be heard. She's a stay-at-home mom, so I get that she's the one in the trenches. But for big things, I wanted to have my voice heard. I wonder if there's a little of that going on here. Some background to help understand the family dynamic. My, 22, parents aren't understanding people. Dad, 57, is significantly worse. He thinks his way is the correct way, and we always need to learn from him. He's very, very close to his siblings, especially my Uncle Peter, 60, and always likes to take their opinions. I have a sister, Laura, 28. She's amazing, but kind of soft and gets emotional pretty easy. Growing up, my parents were manipulative and borderline emotionally aggressive towards her, and I think she also tried to shelter me in a way. So my experiences growing up were quite different from hers. I thought she was just a drama queen and didn't realize until I got older. I'd say my mom's changed and tries to be supportive now, but Dad's still good old Dad. Me and Laura are close, but she's not as close to our parents, especially Dad, but she still talks to them. My Grams, Dad's mom, gave me a ring as a gift for my 18th, which Granddad had gifted her a long time back. It's not worth a lot, but definitely a special piece. Okay, now to the issue at hand. A couple years back, Laura went on a date or two with a guy, Harry, 30 I think, but nothing came of it. Fast forward to now. It turns out this guy Harry is from a very upper-class family, and Uncle Peter is friends with his dad. I guess at one point, Harry mentioned to him that he went on a date with Laura, and Peter and his wife pretty much lost their mind, trying to get them back together and other crap. Laura's been with Jack, 34, for over a year now, and they're serious. Dad, of course, sat Laura down to convince her that Harry is the one. Also, a side note, it's not like Jack is unemployed or some crap. He's an attorney and has a good background. I know there was a massive argument between all of them after Laura found out Dad had literally gone to Jack and told him to leave her. Jack brought up the idea of eloping. I encouraged it, and Laura agreed. Me, and a few others from Jack's side, helped them set up everything and get a marriage license. I gave Laura Graham's ring as a happy elopement gift. I did tell Mom vague details on what was going on, but Dad and Peter and company found out a few days ago. It's been a clusterfuck since then. Apparently, Uncle Peter's embarrassed and doesn't have face in front of Harry and his family. Dad's upset at me for helping them, but more so because I gave Grams a special ring for something like this. He said one of us could have at least told them beforehand and not created this situation now. I won't even get started on what's going on within the extended family. Was I the a-hole for helping them elope and also giving Grams's ring away? Some people are saying I shouldn't have brought myself into Laura's drama, and my aunt actually said giving the ring away was the same as stealing it. Not the a-hole. It was gifted to you. Sounds like a family heirloom, but seeing as Laura is your sister, it stays in the family too. Not the a-hole. Firstly, the ring was a gift to you, and you could do with it what you wished. Secondly, your dad and uncle are a-holes for interfering in your sister's personal life, as well as doing so for the sake of their own social standing.